Hi and welcome to the Conversations in Birth Confidence. I'm Charlotte Canyu from Birth Essence and I support women who are terrified of birth to find some confidence and really enjoy this experience. And today I'm welcoming Mars Lord from Abuela Doulas, and I'm really pleased to be welcoming her. She's a fantastic doula, an award-winning doula, a mother of 5 and now recently a grandmother as well.
Yeah.
So fantastic long years of experience supporting women. So tell me a little bit more about yourself and your work.
So, as you said, I'm Mars Lord, founder of Abuela Doulas. Abuela being Spanish for grandmother, because I really do believe in bringing the wisdom of the grandmother forward into modern birth, etc. I work as a doula, a birth doula, and a postnatal doula. I'm also a doula trainer, so I train new doulas, predominantly Black and Asian women, but not exclusively so. And I'm a birth activist who believes in colouring in the landscape of birth. A lot of our imagery, a lot of the things that we see, the books, the information that's given is all very white-centred, which can be off-putting for women of colour who don't see themselves reflected or represented. And so what I do is I speak a lot, I do interviews like this, to just continue to raise awareness so that we can do something to close the disparity in the mortality rates and the morbidity rates for Black and Asian women as when compared to those of white women. And for those that don't know, Black women are 5 times more likely and Asian women twice as likely to die pre-birth, during birth and post-birth. Of course, the rate of mortality is low, but if you're Black, if you're Asian, you're disproportionately more at risk. So that's what I do. I work as a doula, I work as a doula trainer, and I'm a birth activist.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think what you said with statistics there, they were specifically for death, but I would imagine, I know that was from the Embrace report, and I would imagine that if that's the case with death, that there are similar discrepancies between just outcomes potentially,
Yes.
not death, but outcomes and way people are treated the whole across the board. It's like a stark statistic with death, because we're not used to death really in this country, because we're quite good at saving lives, but still that's a whacking difference really when there's such a low statistic. I think that might make it even more stark.
Absolutely. And what I'm beginning to look at and starting to gather information about is, as you say, the morbidities, the near misses, the outcomes, finding out what the outcomes are like for Black and women. And of course, all of this adds to birth trauma statistics and Black maternal mental health. So all of these things are of vital interest and importance to me, because I'm a mother of 5, as you said, and I've recently become a nonna, so my first grandson was born. But my children are disproportionately at risk during this period of mortality, morbidity, mental health than those that are white.
Yeah. And is there any obvious reasons that stand out, or is it such a complex, like to find the solution thing?
It's a variety of reasons, but it has an underlying foundation and cause. When I'm first asked about it, when people first hear about it, there's an assumption that it has to be to do with the Black body. And I was at a Black birth conference just on Monday, and she said that to hypothesize that the Black body has evolved to die in childbirth is stupid. And she's right. So, particularly as globally we are the majority, it's just in the West that we are the minority. So people think that first it's because we we have a tendency towards diabetes, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, and obesity. But that blames the black body, which points towards eugenics, which is the study that says that white bodies are superior to black bodies. And, we know that came about during the time of Darwin and his relatives and different learned white men that were out deciding exactly how the world should be.
There's a lot of stuff that's been decided by white men with big blind spots and a very big presumption of the world starting from them.
Yeah,
everything from
absolutely.
textbooks that I've studied, everything is just, there's the norm, there's the baseline, and anything that's different isn't just different, it's like not working properly because it's not like that. And that's a man and then a woman is already a big difference.
Yes.
And different doesn't mean broken.
That mix. Black women are actually at the lowest rung of the ladder, by dint of being women and by dint of being black. So that's where we're placed on the societal ladder.
Yeah.
So when we discovered that babies born of mothers who smoked were of a smaller birth weight, we began to educate ourselves and people to ensure that when these babies were born, they had a better chance of a decent birth weight. So we talked about the importance of not smoking, and we put resources, etc., in it. But when it comes to black bodies, we just say, well, they are more likely to the end. So where are the resources that go into that? Where are the things that go into that? The second reason we're told is because black people don't access antenatal classes, and they access care later than white women do. Well, we need to look at what history has taught us as black people about what happens when we put ourselves into white hands to be educated, where history is told from a white male lens, where our medical books, etc., talk about the differences in our bodies, but again, nodding back to eugenics, making black bodies inferior in many and every way. Then we need to look at our modern textbooks and leaflets. And often when you see black images, they're there now that we finally have black images in some of the birth resources, etc. They tend to be put next to or under the headings that are hugely negative, which continue that trope and that narrative that black people are stupid or constantly having babies or irresponsibly aborting babies, etc. And so we are demonized. So to then ask us to bring ourselves into white spaces to talk about how our bodies should be treated. You've seen the Tuskegee men who were given syphilis injections to see how syphilis worked, but they weren't told what it was they were getting or the side effects of what they were getting. And then they were sent home to be with their families, their wives, their partners, spreading syphilis, etc. We know that when the pill was trialed, initially it was going to be for men. They decided that the complications and the side effects were too much for men. So then they decided to trial it on women. When the FDA decided that no, it's unethical, you can't do this testing on women, they took it across to Puerto Rico. They took it across to places where they could test it on black and brown bodies. The contraceptive injection, Deprova-B, was tested very heavily on black bodies and is still used illegally across the world to sterilize whole swathes of black and brown communities. So to ask black women, black people to step into white classes where history continues to tell us and present day continues to show us that our black bodies aren't valued is a pretty hard ask. And then the last reason that we're given, or the third reason we're given, I'm sure there are many more, but these are the three that come up the most for me, is socioeconomics, where we don't have enough money. And statistically speaking, we do tend to be at the lower end or the lowest end of the socioeconomic scale. But that doesn't sort of make sense when you look at some of the high profile people, for example, Serena Williams, who almost died the day after her baby was born. because she wasn't listened to by nurses and doctors, despite paying for the best care money could buy, being in a top private hospital, being an articulate woman, being a woman of self-agency. So the message that we're given is, well, no, the reason Black women are dying in childbirth and pregnancy and post-birth is because they're too Black, they're too stupid, and they're too poor. So we blame the victim rather than the system that she's come into, the structure that she's come into. If these things are all true, then what are we doing to redress them, to ensure that Black women have the best care for their inferior bodies, the correct information and education for their stupid brains, set at a price point that their empty pockets can afford? So for me, the underlying cause is implicit bias, unconscious bias. And we all suffer from our different unconscious biases. But also we have to talk about the elephant in the room, which is racism within the system. So medicine was designed as a white patriarchal system. Medicine was taken out of the hands of the people. Normally there were women that were working, and, you know, and the healers in the villages and the towns, etc., brought into the hands and pockets of white men who realized that they could make money here. But then the village healers then became the scut workers, the ones who would come in and just do the filthy things that the doctors didn't really want to do. And then it was decided that men would train them in the ways of birth. And what we saw at the beginning was this huge increase in maternal death. And so those same rich white men would go and secretly talk to those Black women, those poor women who were the healers in the village, to find out, well, actually, how to make this work. But it didn't stop them from experimenting on Black bodies. Marion Sims in the States experimented extensively on enslaved Black women with no analgesia, etc. And much of our modern obstetrics is based on the discoveries that he made and the work that he made. So he was called, or probably still is in some areas, the father of modern obstetrics. But actually modern obstetrics was born on the backs of, in the bodies of, Black women.
One of the things that doesn't even make sense in that is if you have a dialogue going on that Black women are inferior, etc., on the bodies, then you use those bodies to experiment to find out how to treat the people, then it doesn't even make sense. If you believe that they don't work, and then you know, it's like, and that I think is it throughout the whole system, where all women are seen as broken, like across the board, and their bodies don't work. Then you have another level, Black women are more broken or more, you know, it's like there's another layer on top, and then that's before we get into any like the other things that can bring you right down, like able-bodied, or all the other things that, or mental health, any conditions you could have on top of that. And it's for me, the more I look at it, I'm just like, is, you know, if you relate from a human being point of view and look at the human in front of you and just go, hi, and what do you need? Who are you? What do you need? Tell me how it is. It doesn't really matter what you know before. If you drop all your own assumptions and as well as you can, and so I'm listening, because as this was kind of recent for me, and I'm like on the end of the white privilege, it's like second down from the white man, really. There's like white middle class educated, you know, and it is like you said, an unconscious thing with me, that I didn't see it, didn't notice it, didn't think about it. And you kind of think that everyone's on an equal playing field until you realize that they're not, because I'm personally not treating people differently. I don't realize until I look at it and go, oh wow. And it's really upsetting, and it upsets me as well that like the kind of American model and the general model of interference and over medicalization is still getting exported out to the developing world. I see that happening in, my husband's from the Gambia and his mother's a lay midwife in her village, and so they're all born there. But if they go to the hospital, it's different, I think. I don't know what happens there,
Yeah.
but I know it's different because it's women's business there. So I don't really know anything about how it happens in the Gambia because I haven't yet had a chance to speak to his mum with a translator. And just because she gets called out. Each elder woman in the village will do their family in their compound, but she gets called out with difficulties to go around the other compounds as like one that's more. So, and so that's lovely that I know that my husband was born in that traditional way. I don't know what that was in the village. And so, yeah, it's...
And what we've done is we've taken our colonial ways, dumped them in developing countries, come back, developed our own practice, but left a lot of sort of barbaric practices in the developing countries. And then we turn around and we look at them and say, my God, it's shocking. Do you see the way they do that? But they didn't used to do that until the colonizer went over and started that. And now the colonizers looking back and that's absolutely appalling. And it's like, but you know, it's like so many things in the birth world, so many things that have been, you know, appropriated. Things like baby wearing, carrying your baby, which has been done across the globe for millennia and is suddenly being packaged by middle-class white women and companies to be sold to the indigenous populations that they took the materials and the methods from in the first place. So now you have to pay hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds to be seen to have the right wraps, etc. When African women would just get any piece of cloth and...
Well, they still do. The ones I know. That's where I learned from. It's really convenient and practical to be able to do it with any piece of cloth and not have that.
Absolutely.
Just the closeness to your baby and I've learned a lot from that, watching the way the Gambian community I know work babies and with mothers.
So what we've done is we're pretending that we've invented things that we haven't invented. We look at breastfeeding, we just go across and have formula companies destroying indigenous breastfeeding left, right, and centre. And suddenly it's like, you know, oh, this is the middle class white way to breastfeed, to carry our babies, to do all of these things that we decimated in other communities, looked down on other communities for doing, and have now come round in history and said, oh, aren't we amazing? Look at what we're doing. Now, this isn't about a personal attack. This isn't about, oh my God, white people, you're so awful. But it's about looking really honestly at what has happened. Yeah. And we demonize the black family. I was at a fertility conference. And as part of this conference, we'd seen a play and we were all sort of sipping fizz and having canapes or something afterwards. And this white guy literally bounded up to me and out of nowhere said, but of course, with your people, so we know exactly what he's talking about, he's talking about black people. He said, with your people, the men just impregnate lots of women and just keep going on, and you've got nothing but broken families. But that's a narrative that suits the white world. We don't see the black families, the black fathers, you know, we just look for the broken bit. But it was the white world that broke it in the first place and enslaving people, taking families and literally ripping them apart for profit, taking, you know, men and making them impregnate lots of different women so that they could have a bigger breeding stock, and then ripping mother from child, father from wife, you know, and we have these generational traumas that have come down, and then we sit in judgment and say, well, look at them, look at the way they can't even hold a family together. And it wasn't that long ago. We think about enslavement as though it was something that happened almost thousands of years ago, but it really was only a few generations. The last living enslaved person, or person who was enslaved, I think only died very recently. So this is all part of our modern history. This isn't ancient history. This is all part of our modern history, but we don't look at those things. And then we wonder why we see such poor outcomes when there's the intergenerational trauma, there's the entrenched unconscious bias, and then there's an unjust white patriarchal system within which we tell Black women to bring themselves and give themselves over, and then wonder why they're not doing so well in the birthing space.
I know. It's really, what was I going to say? I've gone blank. It's the work that I do is connected with all of this, because what I see is like the slavery in the form that it happened may not be legal, may not be happening now, but because of the generational trauma that's passed down, the kind of imprinting that's happened is still there, it's still happening. So I see almost like what's happening is almost as if it's still happening, as the wounds are still there and the unconscious stuff that's happening on the white side. It's as if, like, if I don't look at it in me, I'm still carrying that colonial energy and mentality in me on a unconscious level. And so I do a lot of healing work on myself to look at that and going back to past life memories, or just going back to what energy is with me, questioning. And it's uncomfortable, it's really uncomfortable. That, I think that's one of my questions. We've totally gone off that, you know, you've spoken that sometimes when you bring this subject up, to, as part of the solution, to talk about it, to, for white care providers to understand where you're coming from and what you need from them, wanting the women to be more confident in birth and for the birth to be respected, and then there's a shut down, a defensive reaction, a denial that exists, and so and I understand how that can happen when you're not aware. And so when you bring up the subject, and it's horrible, right? It's awful, the stuff, and then that hits on something so when I've had the uncomfortable feeling, it's hit on something in me that's, you could say, a wound in me about the colonial, and I'm like taking it personally, and as if you're saying that I've done it, and then I'm going, well, I didn't. So then there's like this defense, not because it's so uncomfortable that you don't want to go there. Whereas actually, if you go to the discomfort, and this is the work that I do, go to the discomfort, feel it, release it, and then you can come back, and then you can. And it's a big job, I think. But
it's not easy. It's not easy work, and most people, or a lot of people, sorry, don't want to do that kind of work, because for all the reasons that you say, because it's uncomfortable, and they don't see themselves as living in privilege, because they don't feel that they didn't set up these things, but they do benefit from the state quo, which was set up like that, you know. And we know that race is a social construct, but it was constructed to benefit white people. It was finding a way to get the lower stratas of society to stop coming together, and a way to break them up. Well, at least you're not Black. Well, at least you're not Black. And so the people who had started to join at the bottom of society are now disjointed, because the white ones at the bottom are like, haha, I might be at the bottom, but I'm not as low as you. And so it continues and it perpetuates. And people talk all the time, they tell me, but I'm not racist, I'm not racist. And I'm like, well, that's great for you. But it's not great for society. If the structures and the systems are racist and imbalanced, well, you're still benefiting, even though you're sitting there saying, yeah, but I'm not doing anything about that. And that's really passive. You could be sat in a swimming pool, in a pool full of racists, and you pat yourself on the back going, well, I'm non-racist. Well, how does that help me? What helps me, what helps marginalized communities, is when you become anti, because anti is an active thing. Non is passive. So you sit back, pat yourself on the back. Or do you get up and call out racism where you see, and hold the mirror up to yourself and do the uncomfortable work and say, okay, I recognize my bias in this, or I don't recognize my bias, and I want to learn how. And people say, well, you know, whenever Black people are talking, then there's always someone who has to bring it back to the common denominator. So at this Black Birth conference, I'm there listening. The conference is titled, the reproductive Sankova, Black maternal health, Black childbirth. Everything about it says this is about Black women and Black women's experience. And then a senior NHS midwife who's at the conference without going through the chair, without taking her turn, without saying, can I ask a question? Can I put a comment? Cuts through different people who have gone through the chair, who have asked for the mic to ask their questions, make their comments, and says, not Black women, all women. We need to remember it's all women. We need to remember it's we. And it's like, why are you so defensive that you have to silence and erase the voice of Black women, the experiences of Black birth, so that we know that we can do better in the maternal world for all people. But we're talking about the fact that Black women are disproportionately more likely to die. This is the issue we're talking about. It's not bloody pie. We're not saying, give me your pie, you're going to get less, you're going to get less, you're going to get less. We're saying the spotlight at the moment needs to be on the most vulnerable in this birth community. And currently, Black women, Asian women are the most vulnerable within this birthing community. And that's what the conference is about. That's the work that I'm doing. So for you to jump up and down and say, no, 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 but all women, no, 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 but all women. So when are the white birth world, when are the senior speakers going to actually sit the fuck down and let Black women have their voice? And again, I go back to my earlier point. Why should we bring ourselves into your education spaces? Why should we bring ourselves into your birthing world when this is what you do, when we talk about our experiences, when we try to have a conversation about our experiences, which actually has nothing to do with you in the sense that we're not talking about you, we're talking about what happens to ourselves. Why do you need to come and recenter yourself? Why do you make the conversation about you? When
what you're looking for really is them to come in and listen to you and say, what can I do to help this statistic of Black women, right? Not to make it
or go away and think, right, I've done some listening, what the hell can I do? Because it's not for us to be giving you the solutions. And someone's going to go, oh, great. So you've told me there's a problem and now you're not going to tell me how to solve it. Well, you created the problem. You work out how to solve it. Black women are already traumatized. There's a term coined by an American professor called Arlene Geronimus, and the term is weathering. These are all the microaggressions. These are all the daily, tiny little bits of racism and unconscious and implicit bias that comes at us all the time. If you look at a cliff and the waves are going, strong waves, small waves, just waves constantly eroding the face of that cliff. That's what weathering is. So by the time as a Black woman, you are ready to birth your child, your children, you've already undergone years and years of weathering. So your cortisol levels, your stress levels are high, naturally high within yourself, because you're spending a lifetime protecting yourself from the constant barrage of the waves, the microaggressions that come your way. Walking down the road with your child and a white woman puts her hand through your child's hair because they like the way it looks and they want to see how it feels. I'm a big fan of breasts. I think, women have incredible breasts that do incredible things. I love breastfeeding, etc. I'm not going to walk up to you in the street and give you a breast a fondle because I think, oh, that's a really good shape. It's an assault. And people are like, yeah, but it's so minor. But if you keep multiplying all the minor aggressions, all the microaggressions, then no wonder the day that you say something that you didn't realize was wrong, someone just explodes and you're like, oh my God, they're so disproportionate about this. But Do you know how many microaggressions we face from the point of waking up in the morning to going back to bed, whether it's on screen, whether it's on the streets? I look at the adverts that we have on the TV, and it's great that we're seeing more black and brown people, but why are their stories always in the center of white ones? So I recently saw a holiday advert, and it's a beautiful young black girl talking, and she talks about, it's the flight they're taking, and she talks about her mother, black woman, her father, white man, her sister, black woman, her grandmother, white, her grandfather, white. So how all of the family dynamics, black normality, black good family, can only be contained within white family. So yes, we're making strides forward, but hang on, where are the black families? When a few years ago they had a black family for the John Lewis Christmas advert, there was a furore on Twitter. Where are the normal families? So we're not seen as normal because normal is white. And when we say woman, we don't mean all women, like that midwife jumped up to shout about, or that people in the birth world shout about. We don't mean all women at all. We mean white women. That's the default. That's the center. So we need to look beyond our initial defensiveness, because no one is accusing you, unless you deserve the accusation, of being a violent racist who's walking out calling black people names. But then it happens so often, but we blame it on the drugs or the drink. So I'm not really racist. I just had too much to drink. So what was inside you that the drink caused to come out, that the drugs caused to come out, And so all of those things play into a black person's birthing experience. How they are received by the birthing world, how they're received in the maternal settings, whether it's hospital or home birth. And home birth for black women is so incredibly hard to get because we're so high risk. I've been into birth centres with black women, and after a few hours they've been told that they need to leave because they haven't progressed enough. In 4 hours, there's no time for their body to do anything. But white women are in the birth centre and no one is hassling them to have to leave after a few hours in case of obstruction. Black women are actively not encouraged to go for birth centre births, etc. Why is that? These are the things that we need to think about and look at. Look at the internationally board certified lactation consultants. They have taken the opportunity to reach that profession away from so many people and communities that would really benefit from being represented by IBLC's internationally board certified lactation consultants, by throwing in lots of red tape. And there's a joke amongst black workers: white people love legislation and red tape. Anything to tie up the profession, so that white women will rise. So there's a whole lot to think about, and it's a whole big ball of mess with intergenerational trauma, with continual microaggressions, with the closing of opportunities. There's a breastfeeding book that's coming out in January 2020, 10 chapters written by 10 experts, 1 Asian GP, 9 white people. Where are the black IBLCs, the black experts that do exist, but we tend not to look at, or listen to? When these white women write their birthing books talking about different issues, where are we in that conversation? No, it's not about that, Mars. You don't understand. That's not what this premise is. This is about. So when we look back at different women's movements across this country, with the suffragettes, black women were told they could march, but they'd have to march at the back. Because this isn't about black people, this is about women. So our issues, our needs are not met or recognised. Feminism has failed black women because it's about all women. And we benefit from a system that is in place. Even though we're fighting the system, we don't want you to take our extra little bit of pie. So there's a lot to think about. It's why I'm so passionate about what I do. It's why I keep speaking out. It's why I'm always saying, yeah, I'll come and talk. I'll come and talk. But it's not a comfortable talk that I give.
No, it's not. Well, I mean, I've got more comfortable with hearing this now, but I know that it's not comfortable because when I first started thinking about these issues, I had to face all the discomfort in me. I know there's a journey. I guess it's a journey you're inviting the white workers who are well-meaning and want to help, because that would be me in the beginning as ignorant, complicit unknowingly, and wanting to be different, wanting to change.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of that, gives me goosebumps actually. There's a lot of that people want to be, and that's kind of all these layers in the way of being able to be in that uncomfortable place, have the conversation, and then do something different. However small that is, it adds up. It adds up. I mean, I went through and tried to unwhite my website because I hadn't noticed before that it was all white pictures. It seems like a small thing, but what you're saying is it's not in the grand scheme of things. It's a thing. It's a step. It's a step. And if you can't do a big thing, start with a small thing.
Absolutely. And be wary of tokenizing.
Yeah.
You know,
it's not intended to be that from me. It's like, what can I do? Well, there's something I can do it there. What else can I do?
Look at what your intention is. Yeah. Look at what your intention is, but then look at what it will be perceived to be. You know, so it's like, if you have a bad birth experience, and with your birth providers, it's not that they woke up in the morning to come and do you harm. That's not their intention. Their intention is good, but the outcome was poor. So how is it perceived? What work can we do within ourselves to change it? And there's so much information out there. You know, I run a reproductive justice retreat, mainly for black people, but white ones can come along too and actually sort of do some internal work and change so that when they come back out, they can work as allies. I run a cultural competency course, but actually I'm thinking that maybe I should change the title of it, because I don't want you to be culturally competent. I want you to be culturally safe, and I want you to not be racist, and I want you to treat my daughters, my sisters, my mothers, my aunts, my cousins as human beings, rather than keeping that less than human, less than implicit bias that's within you. You know, and when we run black spaces, black community spaces, for you not to throw your toys out the pram and say, but I should be allowed to be in there. Why? I find that black women.
It's like the hashtag Me Too movement. There's always someone who says, "What about men?" When you're talking about women, there's like, when you're talking about women, and someone says, but men get assaulted too. Men get this, and it's like, yeah, but we're talking about women, and then you're saying the same thing's happening when you're black women talking. A white woman will come in and say, what about us? It's like, well, you've had plenty of airtime, and right now we're talking about this problem, because there's going to be another space where you can maybe mix and include to find, because we need to have a dialogue, right? Because if there's a lot of people like me who haven't got a clue and we want to be part of the solution, we need to ask you, because although I know you said that we shouldn't need to be asking you for the solutions, but when I'd be like, well, I don't know what to do. Who do I ask? I can't ask my white friend what the problem with the black people, you know, what is the problem? I need to ask you and say, what's happening? What can I do? And then think about that. But then that space you're describing, if it's for black women to feel safe together and to explore.
Well, you mentioned the Me Too movement. The Me Too movement was started by a black woman, but we all forget about Sandra Burt.
I remember reading that. Yeah.
We forget about her because a white lady co-opted it
Yeah.
And then it's become this big thing that people can poo-poo or whatever, when actually
Or if you find.
started to support and give
Mm,
voice to the most vulnerable within the vulnerable. But now it's become a big white movement, and guess who's being forgotten again?
mm,
The very people who started the movement. And I'm
yeah.
not talking about the founder of the movement, but sorry, the very people who the movement was founded for.
Mm,
And we seem to do a lot of that. We do have this tendency to, or white people do have this tendency to co-opt and want to come into the spaces, and it's not fair, and they don't know how to sit and listen, and then they cry,
mm,
and then they get upset, and everyone turns around to comfort the crying white women. Meanwhile, black women are dying
mm,
because your tears are more important than my death.
mm,
Look at plastic. There's far more outrage about single-use plastic and the way plastic is killing the planet than there is for the fact that black women are dying. Doesn't mean the issues aren't important, and it isn't important that we look at plastic, etc. This is
mm,
not trauma top trumps, but there's more outrage about that. There's more outrage about the climate than there is about the fact that black women are dying. So what does that tell you about where we are in your priorities and in your pecking order?
what would you say? There's two groups, I guess. What do you, for the women that are listening to this interview later who might be black and pregnant and are facing all this, what what's like advice and support do you give them to find that, they want the confident birth, they don't want to die, they want the confident birth, and the
Mm-hmm.
best that birth can be. I know you've witnessed that as a doula, and you witnessed that
Oh
with
yes, and I saw it just
grandchild,
recently.
and
Yeah.
wonderful, amazing births with
So
these non-broken bodies.
I'd say find your black birth keepers.
Mhm.
Find people who understand and know your story. But Ma, say all the white ones, how can you tell them not to come to us because we're brilliant doulas, birth keepers, etc. I'm not telling them not to come to you, but I am saying find the black birth workers, the black birth keepers, the ones who know what it is to be black and to birth.
Mhm.
Remember that the mortality rate is incredibly low. It's incredibly low. I think it's for black women, it's 40 in 100,000. So that is really, it's 40 too many,
Mhm.
but it's incredibly low. It's just that for white women, it's 8 in 100,000. So get good information. Find good people to follow and to learn from and to listen from. If you're not getting the care and support that you expect from your healthcare professionals, if you feel that your midwife or your doctor is being racist, know that you can change them.
Mm.
You know, I'm gonna,
I
I'm a
really want
doula.
people to hear that. I meet so many people who don't know that they can ask to change providers. They don't know they have these choices. I meet a lot of people who don't know that they don't have to just accept what they're given. Even the care that they're offered, even if they don't want to change the care provider, they don't have to accept exactly what they've just said.
Yeah.
It's a really
I will
important
say
point.
this one caveat though. When you are black and you're a black woman, you're labeled as aggressive,
Hmm,
and
hmm.
and they threaten to take care and support away from you.
Mm,
So white women can question,
mm,
white women can request change quite easily, even though many don't know they can do that, but they can do that quite easily. But when you're black, it's a whole other ball game. So I would say to pregnant black women, black people watching this,
mm,
go find yourself some, good black birth keepers. And I'm not saying that, because I was about to say, I'm a doula. I think you should just hire a doula, and particularly a culturally safe doula. But reach out to the Black birthing community and get some information and support there, so that you can find out who you can turn to, where you can turn to give yourselves a much better sort of understanding of the system that you're going into. You know, and there are lots of us out here. It's just very few of us are given a platform, and those of us that have been given a platform have had to fight very hard to get it, and have to fight incredibly hard to keep it in a sea of white experts.
Yeah. What would be your vision for the future of birth? And, you know, like, if all of this was healed, I know that's a big job. I'm hoping it's going to go a lot faster than it took to get it in place to this point. When I look at the, you know, when we talk about culture, I think, well, there's British culture of baby wearing is completely lost. You know, that kind of thing we've lost. Like, I know the Welsh used to have a shawl they used to carry their babies with, and all that information that's lost. I look at that, and so now we're kind of lost here, I think, as well. Like, and it's all mixed in with all this. But imagining that all that was healed somehow, that we'd cleared the generational trauma, cleared the imprinting that keeps the slavery patterns, the victim patterns, all of those patterns that you've talked about today were just gone. It wasn't racism. I know it kind of sounds a bit like an impossibility right now, but I'm kind of optimistic in like, because conversations are happening and because what I feel, I'm like, that I want something different. So what would be your vision?
My vision would be that people would be valued, listened to, and able to give birth with grace and dignity. Just as simple as that.
I like that simplicity. I don't want to talk too much right now because I'm feeling that I love the simplicity of that, bringing it back to the simplicity, the human, the vision.
My lovely actor friend Nicholas Pinnock says, if we would just look around the room and see who was the most vulnerable, and all decide that we were going to support and raise up the most vulnerable in the room. And once we'd raised them up, we looked around to say, okay, now who's the most vulnerable? He said, then we would do so well, but we're too busy all trying to take our bit, saying, well, my trauma is worse than yours. Well, what about me? What about me? But if we all collectively looked, said, okay, you're the most vulnerable, you're the most in need. Let's raise you up. Let's do something to support you. And now let's
really
go to
expansive, really beautiful to like bring everyone up together, starting with the most vulnerable who need it the most.
He's a good friend, and you know, I like every so often I tell him, you're kind of wise, really, aren't you?
Yeah, I think we've covered most of the questions. Yeah, I know we could probably talk all day long, but
yeah, I have a grandbaby to get back to.
I know, isn't that wonderful? And you were there at the birth, you were telling me before, and I love the generational thing that you have there. You have your own children, your grandchild, and like you were saying just before we started the interview, the wisdom of the grandmothers, the wisdom that you're bringing, that coming in, it's absolutely beautiful. And that's what I invite in my business, in my practice, inviting that ancient wisdom that's partially been lost. I invite it from wherever, all cultures are in. When I say all women, I do mean all women. When I say it, I know it gets meaning all women is often used and people are thinking right, but when I say it, I mean all of us, like you said, the collective. And I think of the collective history and the grandmothers, and where I start when I work with women, I'm looking for how to raise us all vulnerable, how to clear the imprinting and the wounds. Like you said, that wound of what about me, it's a wound. But when we love each other and bring us up, that's a wonderful vision. So do you have any final thoughts or any final words you'd like to say about anything really to do with birth? I mean, the main theme is for me is like I've called it conversations in birth confidence. So confidence to be you, confidence to have the birth. And I know we're specifically looking at the real
I think listen and hear. Don't be formulating your answer to the question. Listen to hear what women are saying. And if you hear something that makes you personally feel uncomfortable, don't put that back on the person who's speaking.
Own it.
File that away, take it away, and deal with it.
Yeah, get some
But
support with
listen.
it if you need to. Yeah,
Yeah.
with someone else.
But if we listen, yeah. But if we listen,
Mm,
then I think we'll heal the world.
yeah. Well, it's giving me goosebumps as well. Really, it's been really wonderful to speak to you, Mars. I'm really pleased that you
Thanks for
came to
having
your
me.
perspective, and I hope that the people listening really take away some support and confidence, whether they be white workers feeling the confidence to listen to Black women that are in their care, or whether it be the Black women who feel that confidence to go out and seek support from a community that is out there. There is a community waiting to support. You'll find the right person. So thank you so much for taking your time this morning, and I hope you have a lovely day getting back to grandmother duties, nana duties. Yeah.
Nonna in the house.
So thank you so much. The real
You're welcome.
pleasure. Mm-hmm.